This episode of PS I Love You XOXO is brought to you by Pro Flowers. Aren't you tired of guessing what your Valentine wants for Valentine's Day? Wouldn't you love an easy, fail-proof way to look like a pro? This year, Pro Flowers is making it easier than ever by taking out all the guesswork. On top of their already low prices, right now you can get 24 roses with free glass vase. It needs to say a free glass vase for $29.99 plus shipping and handling, or upgrade. And for $9.99 more, you can get 24 long stem assorted roses with a premium vase and chocolates. Just go to Pro Flowers, that's proflowers.com, and use my code XOXO. You support this show, you get the video all to stay on, and you get some cool flowers that you send to your girl or guy, and they go, oh my God. And here's a spoiler. Don't got a Valentine's Day? Just give them to your mom. Moms like flowers. Maybe your dad likes flowers too. Proflowers.com. XOXO. You got it? What's up, everybody? Welcome to PS I Love You XOXO, episode 73. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Miller, alongside the sharpest dressed man in the room, Colin Moriarty.
Reminds me of that crazy drummer guy. Remember that?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
where he's
that
like
was a song.
twirling,
Yeah.
he's twirling the drumstick. He's just fucking
They were
rocking.
playing Sharp Dressed Man.
I forgot about that one. I haven't seen that one in a long, long time. Ladies and gentlemen, how the fuck are you? Not your ordinary episode of PS I Love You XOXO. As you can see, no computer. Colin doesn't need it today. As you can see for me, no papers.
It's the only computer I need is right here, Greg.
Finally, you're just done. You're done with the machines of man.
I got this computer right
there
up here.
There it is. What's happening is Tim and I have gone to RTX Sydney. We are flying back currently. At the time you'd be seeing this, maybe or we should have just landed, I guess. Basically, we're putting this one in the tank before we leave. Doing this one, so we can't do. If PlayStation's closed down, sorry, we didn't know that was going to happen. We couldn't cover that. So not the usual pomp and circumstance of the show. Same closing segments, of course, because you're also supportive over on kindafunny.com/PSQ and PSM. But here we have to do something different, Colin. And so what I was thinking about for this episode, because we like to do the evergreen episodes. We did a whole bunch for the holidays, right? And granted, you could get another host while I'm gone, but nobody can work with you the way I work with you. What are you gonna do? Who are you gonna bring?
I don't really want to work with anyone else.
You're gonna wheel in Aaron.
I barely want to work with you. It's like
you're gonna bring in Shuhei Yoshida. You got that
no.
Nobody can fill this gap.
No.
So what I was thinking for an evergreen episode, we've already done the best Vita games. We did just recently the top 10 PS4 games, all that stuff.
Could do PS3 games.
We could, but we're not going.
PS2 games or PS1 games.
These kids, the kids today who are watching on the YouTube, they don't even know what a PS3 is.
No.
They've never even heard of it. You try to talk to them about calling all cars, they're like, what now? Never heard of it.
Best Net Your Rosie game. Devil Dice.
There it is. Nailed it.
I think it's the only one.
So instead what I thought...
It isn't.
Because I started looking at the calendar, thinking about what would be good evergreen content for you and I. And I noticed that a week before this posts.
Yeah.
So last week
yes.
would have been January 31st.
Yes.
January 31st is my 10-year anniversary of Jeremy Dunham responding back to me and asking for an interview at IGN. The next day he interviews me. That afternoon or that evening, then he hires me. And so technically my anniversary is March 1st in terms of being a full-time. I work in the video game industry as video game enthusiast media, whatever the hell you want to call it. We did at IGN and what we do now. So a decade for me. However, you have a decade of full-time, this is your life as well. Granted, you had the freelance stuff before then, and you did a whole bunch of little things like that. But in terms of, you moved to San Francisco, you worked at IGN, you did all this stuff. I felt like we should do it like this.
That happened.
Every time we do one of the top 10 shows, we do our Game of the Year shows, we do all this stuff, I think the part we enjoy, or seem to enjoy the most, is when we do the shout-outs. And you shout out games, sometimes you shout out people and things along those lines. I thought what we do is do a decade of shout-outs. The PlayStation stuff, because we're a PlayStation podcast, whether it be stories, whether it be games, whether it be developers, whether it be people that have influenced our decade working on PlayStation.
Yeah, I want to keep it. I'm just going to talk about people. The games that they're related to, I think, are tangential but important, and then there'll be some great games in there.
Yeah.
But that is a great idea because I think one of the things that people don't quite understand. Let me give you an example.
Lay it on me, Colin Moriarty.
A couple weeks ago, Colin was right went up about games, too many games on PSN.
Yeah.
Our buddy Adam Boyes, who used to be in charge of third-party relations at Sony, we went back and forth over Twitter.
Yeah.
People were like, "Oh, Adam Boyes really ripped Colin up," or Colin really got mad at Adam Boyes, and man, they and I'm like, actually, Adam and I are friends, and he reached out privately while it was going on, and we coordinated so that he'll come on and talk about this issue on GDC. Yeah. It's those kinds of connections, the kind of backroom kind of behind the scenes kind of things that I think are really interesting and give you guys a lot of context into the people we know and our relationships with those people, and also how that affects what we have access to. It doesn't necessarily affect the nature of the coverage, but I think it's like interesting insight, an interesting lens into like our lives. The 99% of the time we're not on camera or not in front of a microphone.
Sure,
it adds texture to that experience. And I think by people understanding some of the people that have helped us along the way, or some people that have given us access along the way, or some of the people that have stood in our way, that we can give people some insight into that experience. And that Adam Boyes thing I thought was really interesting to me, because everyone assumed that, well, Adam and I go back several years.
And you threw it all away just
and we ruined it. We ruined all of it.
Because you said there's too many games.
But there's always I don't know how you would feel about this statement, but there's personal relationships all over the place. There's intertwining threads, and it doesn't affect the coverage of the game, but it affects. What does it affect? It affects. Well, I have to talk about this game. Who should I reach out to? I'm interested in doing this interview at GDC. I only have 5 slots. Well, these are the 5 people that I want to target.
Sure.
I think that's interesting stuff.
No, 100%.
And we should let people into that world.
No, I mean. In looking back at a decade of covering PlayStation for me or whatever, right? Like my first shout out is Jeremy Dunham, because it starts with him, right? I mean, Dunham, of course, ran IGN PlayStation, editor-in-chief when I got hired there, but then would go on to run IGN editorial, then would go on to do a bunch of different things, work at Right, Unit 15, work over there on the SOCOM
13,
stuff.
Unit 13, such a big fan that you would call it Unit 15.
I said Unit 13.
You said 15.
Did I really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
You're positive?
No, I'm not
cool,
positive.
Greg, did I say 15 or 13?
I'm not positive. I'm not positive at all. I want to say this to be fair to you. The last maybe 10 times that I've said you said something, you didn't actually say it.
Yeah.
So the odds are in your favor.
It's that thing where I yell at Kevin to rewind the tape. I'm usually pretty confident.
The odds are ever in your favor that you actually said 13, but I think you said Unit 15. Go on.
Zipper Interactive. Now over at Psyonix, of course.
Yes.
Big time over at Psyonix.
Yep.
Big deal. Shout out to Rockley.
They just have a little bit of money over there. They don't have much.
They're just doing okay, you know what I mean? But no, I mean, you have to give a shout out to him. Dunham, of course, a huge influence on both of us. And I mean, I think personal lives and career-wise. But I mean, I'll never forget that night, January 31st, of being in Columbia, Missouri, next to my girlfriend at the time on the couch, watching TV. Bless you.
Cough. Thank you, though.
Having the
right
computer open and seeing the email pop up on Gmail and respond. It was like 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night, responding right back.
Using Gmail in 2007.
Yeah. Well, I got out of when I left
Very
Mizzou,
nice.
I got rid of my Mizzou.edu. They turned it off on me, so I'd probably be using that like an idiot still. Hit him back right away. And he responded right away again. He's like, "Oh, I appreciate the prompt response." He's like, "Can you do an interview at lunch tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sure, I can." And closed it. And I turned to my girlfriend at the time. I'm like, "I can't believe this is happening. I'm finally getting my shot." And they finally responded, because as I always say, this was my 13th attempt on that Gmail. Let alone what I did on Mizzou. Let alone what I did at GameSpot and EGM and all that jazz. But then she looked at me and she's like, "Yeah, but have you ever played the PlayStation 3? Because it'd come out in November, and we're obviously in January." I was like, "Fuck!" and called the one guy I knew in Columbia, Missouri that had a PlayStation 3, and whenever they ever played, I was like, "Man, this is a disappointing console." And then did an interview with him and didn't get asked one question about PS3 or PS2 for that matter. Really just talking about games and seeing if I knew what I was talking about. And like what always impressed me about Dunham was the fact, and this extends to Chris Roper. Shout out to Chris Roper, of course, from the PlayStation team and now working at PlayStation.com. But when I was doing the interview, I was, first off, desperately trying not to talk too quickly, like I did when I feel like I blew my interview with InQuest Gamer years before. And I mentioned the blog I did for the Tribune, and I heard them say, "Yeah, about that." And they shuffled a bunch of papers. And they were like, "We've been reading those, and is that the real you, or is that a character?" And I was like, that's the realest thing I write at the Tribune. But it was also how impressed I was that they'd done that amount of research, that they weren't just in there seeing, whatever. Right. They had actually gone through and done stuff like that. And so then, like, to get hired a few hours later on that, and then when I almost died in Nebraska in the snowstorm, when I called Dunham at 6 o'clock in the morning my time, so 4 in the morning his time. And I went, wakey, wakey, sleepy head. He goes, it's 4 in the morning. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I almost died in a snowstorm, and I got to turn around. I'll figure out how to get out there. Great dude. Great people.
They are good people. Jeremy is an important person to me too. He was, I was very lucky to intern at IGN in 2003 briefly, and then in 2004 for an entire summer. And Jeremy was one of the first people that I met, and was always very kind to me and nice to me. We would go out and eat chicken wings, and he gave me, there was at IGN, there was, I don't know, it probably doesn't exist anymore, I'm sure it doesn't, but there was a secret message board. This is when IGN's message boards were very heavily trafficked. I don't know how they do now, but back in the day, they were very heavily trafficked in the early 2000s, the early aughts.
Not only was it a great message board, this is before comments on articles existed. So not only was it, hey, we're at the vestibule, talk about whatever the fuck, we're also going and posting about articles.
Right, every article would be posted manually, and you'd hope for the best.
And it rarely worked out that way.
But there was this secret PlayStation 2 message board only for like hardcore PS2 readers and just a small community of people. And he was like, "You're now invited." And
nice.
It was like 18 or 19. I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. But since we're talking about IGN, I mean, I want to just tick off a small list of people that I owe a great deal to. I mean, I started writing on GameFAQs when I was 14, and I bust your balls about it so much, but. I remember when we were at Rooster Teeth Expo or wherever the fuck we were when you were like, it took me 13 times to make fun of each other. I'm like, it took me 0 times because I got my job offer. They in 2007 they just offered me a job out of the blue. I didn't apply. I never applied. It was and always will be one of the great honors of my life that they just were like, do you want this position? The guy that used to work there is a guy named Jason, went to Capcom, and they were kind of scrambling, and I had written many a strategy guide for them. But when I was a young kid, 14, 15, 16 years old, I mean, I spent a lot of my life writing these things for free and just doing it for fun. And writing guides that were for old games mostly. I wrote a guide for Onimusha, I wrote a guide for Super Mario Sunshine, etc. But I wrote the guides that people really love are like Link to the Past and Zelda 2. I wrote all these ASCII maps and all this. And I didn't really have an intention of ever getting to this place at that time. I was doing it for fun. It was a hobby. I loved old video games. I wanted to make my mark in some small way. And as I've said many times in the past, I wrote with a lot of very talented people at GameFAQs. Some of them found their way in the industry. Most of them didn't. I've never heard from most of them in a long time. But it could have been any of us, any one of us, that could have gotten that email that day being like, can you, because the original email came from Stephen Ng, who used to work at IGN, who was like, can we use your facts on IGN? The reason that happened is because GameFAQs and IGN had a cooperation in the late 90s, early 2000s that then fell apart. I don't know what happened, and it might have just expired, whatever it was. And so IGN's like, we'll just make our own. And I was like, yeah, of course. And then they emailed back 10 minutes later, and we're like, do you want to write strategy guides for IGN guides? $150 a guide. And I was like,
rich.
Which is fucking nothing. That's like fractions of a penny
but
of
for
fractions
you at the
of
time,
yeah. And I was doing it anyway.
Money,
So I was like, yes. And this was in 2002, and that's when I was really excited. So this is when I started working with Chris Carl, who's still one of my favorite people in the industry. He works at CBS now, but he was in charge of IGN guides for a very long time. He let me stay at his house when I was in California. I slept on his couch and all these kinds of things, as I've said many times. And so I owe him a great gratitude. I owe Mark Ryan Selly a great gratitude. Who's the person who actually hired me. He's the one who took over for Chris Carl, still at IGN, one of the big wigs over there now in product. I owe a great debt of gratitude to Hillary Goldstein, who works now at EA, but was the editor-in-chief of IGN when I moved over from Guides. And I basically went to him and you in a room, because I was already on Podcast Beyond for several years at this point and doing other things, but a couple of years. And I was like, I do not want to do this anymore, and I need to move over or I'm going to leave.
Yeah, you were like, I'm done. I'm broken.
Yeah. And
see, that's the thing. You joke around that like you got the job without having to apply once or whatever, right? But you came in through the Andy Dufresne back channel of like crawling through shit to get to where you were.
Absolutely.
Where it was like, hey, go play these fucking games and use a fucking racing pedal to take screenshots to upload yourself. I
did whatever it took. It took. And I'll tell you, Greg, and I mean it for people out there, like hard work does pay off. This so-called American dream, this so-called like pulling yourself up and making yourself. Bootstrap. It really is a real thing.
Yeah,
and I am the proof. I'm not trying to be like melodramatic. Like I am the proof. I willed this job into existence. Like I really fucking did. And because as I've said many times in the past, once I saw that glimmer of the door opening and just a little bit of light through, I fucking booted it off of its hinges.
Yeah.
You know, I was
why
like, there's
people
no
like
way
to
no one's,
stand out.
no one's shutting this door on me.
That was the whole thing of like, I could have gone to that newspaper and never written a thing about gaming. That wasn't in the description, right? But I made sure they knew that's what I wanted to do and never let them forget it when we'd have a meeting about their magazine and their blogs and stuff. Till they finally were like, fine, fucking take one, have it, shut up. And I'll never forget that day when I was like, this is my job now. My job is not the general assignment part. It is game over. It is this blog. It is this column. And nobody else knows that. Nobody else needs to know that. But this is what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's the same way I felt. And so I owe a great debt of gratitude to all of those along the way.
Yeah.
And I really do think it's Jeremy, Tal, and Pear, obviously.
Yeah, and that's where like so many
gratitude.
people I want to give shout outs to, you're giving them to. Obviously, Tal. No, we're in the
No,
same
I mean,
boat here.
please. I mean, I just want to make sure that I started as a game facts writer.
Yeah.
I became a guides freelancer, which is really the lowest rung on the freelance chain. I then was an intern. Then I became a freelancer all over the site. Then I became an associate editor. Then I became an editor. Then I became the senior editor.
Yeah.
I did all of that. And I'm super proud of that. I really did start from fucking the embryonic state of anything you can possibly be in this industry and grew to the senior most position on the core editorial staff at IGN in a matter of a decade. And I am utterly fucking proud of that. And I will always look back at that experience with a lot of thankfulness that those opportunities were given to me,
Yeah.
that the people there were patient with me, and that I think I put out some really good work there too. But it was only possible through a significant how do I want to put this? A significant group of people that all decided that I was worth that.
Sure.
And so I am very thankful for those people, and always will be, because there is no bad blood between me and IGN at all, and you and IGN at all. We would be nothing and would be nowhere without what those people did for us.
No, I mean, that's the big thing.
And I will never forget that.
I remember when we were even when we were there, obviously, and now if we had been there, you look at somebody like Damon or whatever, that people would always ask me at events or stuff like, "Oh man, you just lost so and so, and this person just left," and blah blah blah. How have you been there so long? Why are you there so long? Why, and this is when I'd been there 8 years. Obviously, I left just right before 8 years, right? Yeah. And my whole thing was always that I always gave IGN so much credit for how they treated me, and I'm sure you do for how they treated you, and the fact that I never got bored. I never felt like I guess at the very end, I feel like I run into a ceiling, right? All right, cool. I'm the host of IGN. I'm the face of IGN in some respect. Like, there's no next level to that. What does it, you know what I mean? Like, where do I go? How does that grow and evolve? But growing from those early days of being the youngest kid on the PlayStation team to being, we bring in Clements and suddenly I'm mentoring him and stuff. I start, Hillary sees it in me to let me run the PlayStation team after a round of layoffs. You go through this thing, you jump to where, I go into this meeting about this. They want to do original programming, whatever, for a new YouTube channel. And Nick pitches this thing and turns to me and says he wants me to host it, which would be come up at noon. Like, there's so many people. And then not only that, though, right? The fact that Casey Lynch at the time was fine with letting me go do that. Shout out to Casey Lynch for saying that. The switch over, even, and that was still when I was splitting time between editorial and video. Steve Butts then comes in as not before he was editor in chief, but when he's managing editor, and is fine with eventually me making that whole switch over. Fran being my boss, being okay with me doing YouTube stuff to some extent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's all these people that have been instrumental in both of our lives and our careers that are at IGN that the reason we stayed around so long, the reason I stayed around so long was that they let me chase my passions. They let me grow. They listened to me when I said, I need this. They were like, okay, you've clearly justified that. Or in the early days, no, you're not ready for that. Here's what you need to do to make that happen.
Yeah.
Like, there was always a roadmap there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there were frustrations and roadblocks along the way, but whenever I was truly unhappy, or whenever I wanted it to affect change, or they did it. And when I was like, I want a promotion and I want a raise, I got exactly what I asked for.
Yeah.
And it's because I earned that, but it's also because they're good to the people that are good to them.
Yeah.
And I was as loyal as I possibly could have been, and I will always have a sense of loyalty to them. It's like the way I feel Johnny Damon probably feels about the Red Sox. He might have left and done his own thing, went to the Yankees and did other things, but
Ben Affleck, right?
Ben started, yeah, exactly. But he'll always be a Red Sox to like a lot of people, and
Wade Boggs.
Like Wade Boggs, who's also a Yankee, but it's a similar kind of feeling where I'm like, or like Brett Favre when he went to the Vikings.
Sure.
It's
He's
like
still Green Bay.
Yeah, he's a Packer, and I will always be an IGNer. There are going to be very few people that go through those doors. It was true in the past. It was true before we got there. It was true while we were there, and it's true now that will have ever been there as long as we were. Like, it's just not going to happen. I mean, we've already seen people have come and gone that I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like when we were there, no one left for many years. Like there were the same fucking people there until suddenly 2012, 2013, everyone started leaving. Yeah. But so I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for you in this regard as well, because well, I'm thankful for you in many regards. But in terms of the professional kind of thing, you helped shepherd me, along with Chris Roper, who I'm thankful for as well, to identify something I think extra in me that people like Hillary and Nate had identified. I did TRL for a long time and other things, and those podcasts were funny as hell. And I've always meant to like go back and listen to them because they're ridiculous.
Cobra,
yeah.
Commander.
those podcasts are very silly, but you know, it was our unique partnership that allowed me to forge ahead and kind of find my own path away from those things that I wanted to get away from, which was technical writing, because I don't like technical writing anymore. I hit a wall. I did so much of it. I did more of it than anyone should ever do. And so I am thankful for that as well, because you freed me up to do these other things. And then kind of, you know, when you moved over to video, I mean, I basically took everything over. And so, it's funny because it's like I was I'm like the last person that really have the heritage of IGN PlayStation. Like that doesn't really exist anymore. And I'm super proud of what we did with those sites, those channels. Those channels fucking dominated IGN. And not only from a mind share perspective, but from a traffic perspective at a time when Xbox 360 was way more popular than PS3. And I'm always taking a lot of pride in that and just how the internal competition between the channels, how we just won. Well, I am very proud of that, Greg.
That was such a holdover from where we started. You know what I mean? And that's hard, I think, to imagine. But a decade ago, it was that whenever it's friendly. But there was IGN Nintendo and IGN PlayStation, IGN 360 or Xbox. And I remember, you know, Doug Perry was running Xbox when I got there, and Dunham running, you know, and Caspacino running Nintendo. And I remember getting there, and like it was a deal. Dunham wanted to do better, you know what I mean, than every other channel. And so I think he made us all work harder when it was me, Jeff Roper, and he got into your head like you need an exclusive, multiple. Like I remember my first employer review, like my week 2, it was like or after GDC, because I started on a Thursday, had Friday, then it was GDC the next week, and then it was a regular work week. And that real work week was, all right, cool, I want you to get an exclusive this week. It can be anything. It can be screenshots, it can be a video, whatever you can go do, right? And I remember thinking it'd be so hard, and then like you just went through PR people and like, hey, IGN wants an exclusive on this PSP game. They're like, oh yeah, sure. Here's 30 screenshots. They're like, oh fuck, this is awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But it was that thing of motivation that is, you know, Dunham leaves that position. Roper moves up. I move up a little bit. Jeff and I move up, I should say. Clements comes on. You know what I mean? Jeff leaves. You come over. Like it was that we all kept that narrative and that thread, and that's who we were. And then like by the time you get to the point where you're IGN PlayStation, when we had just people, and you had McCaffrey running Xbox. Not that McCaffrey was God damn it. McCaffrey works really fucking hard.
He was our staunchest competition.
Exactly. But it was that thing too. It was just like nobody had that mentality anymore. We still had that mentality because that's how we were brought up. But really what with it went, Hillary, when he went to EIC, Brudvig moved up. And then when Brudvig left, even then we weren't that, they weren't competing.
No, they were trying to wean. They were trying to wean us off that. And I think that there was a lot of patience with the leadership right up to the time we left, in which they really wanted me specifically, I think, to let go a little bit more. And I'm like, I just can't let this go. Like this part of the site. I'm not saying the rest of the site's bad because it's great, but this part of the site's fucking great. And just let me review these. Like I wanted people to be able to come to IGN PlayStation, especially when you left and been like, nothing has changed. And in fact, like this is the go-to place for everything niche, everything AAA, everything Vita.
Yeah.
And I'm sure not like that anymore because we're not there anymore, so we don't champion those things anymore. And that's not an insult because I'm not entirely sure the readers would even really necessarily know that.
Yeah.
But I knew it, and it was hard. Like I refreshed the pages every day. I did as much as I could, and I was super proud of that. But at the same time, what I've taken pride in the most, and I think you did too, and I think that it was one of the things that it might be lost on people, is I take a lot of pride in championing games that no one was talking about, or that I was like, you know what, you should pay extra attention to this game. This game really is good, trust me. And we really were responsible for Ni no Kuni being as big as it was. We really were responsible for Catherine being as big as it was. We really were responsible for the Drinkbox games being as big as they were. We really were responsible for Dragon's Crown, all these things. I'm not saying people weren't playing them. I'm not saying those games wouldn't have sold well. I'm saying we were the biggest video game website in the world championing these games, and it mattered.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of that because I was like, you would have never, the guys on NeoGAF might have known about it. The guys at Reddit might have known about it. But the dude that reads IGN 3 times a month, that buys 5 games a year, never fucking knew about Ni no Kuni. And when he came to IGN and saw it on the front page, which was a big deal for us to get it there because of all the other things that would have done more traffic. They paid attention and they went out and bought that. And I am super fucking proud of that. I always wanted to do that. I was always like, we already know you care about The Last of Us. I care about it too. That's easy, but let's do this. Let's do something that's hard. And I'll tell you what, that Ni no Kuni review, for instance, was one of the most trafficked reviews I ever wrote. And I wrote some reviews for some fucking big ass games,
Amy,
including the cult hit Amy. So I was super responsible for, I'm sorry, I was super proud of that and took that responsibility very seriously because I never wanted to steer anyone down the wrong path. And I know that some people feel like I did at times. But that was never intentional. And I am so thankful for IGN and for Pear and Tal and Steve and Casey and whoever at the time let me just go and let me do those kinds of things. These were the people that let me, when I went up to them and been like, I want to spend a week down at Naughty Dog and talk to them about it. And I wrote the history of Naughty Dog, which is a piece people still love to this day. That piece lost IGN money.
Yep.
Like a lot of it.
That was an inverse, in terms of it would have been way more important or way more profitable for you to sit at here and make the podcast, make Let's Plays, make news stories, and all of that would have done more money in terms of anything else.
The senior editor of the site who was better paid than all the other editors on your core team of your associates and your editors, leaving for a week to go to Santa Monica. You got to pay them. You got to pay me to go back and forth. You're paying for all my food. You're paying for my hotel, my lodging, and then you paid me for a couple weeks while I put it all together and stuff like that. And we put it up, and it was awesome. But they didn't make money on that. Yeah. They didn't have to let me do that, and that was like what was so cool. And I'm proud of that because it's one of the best things I've ever written. But it was their intuitive nature that made me happy, that gave them a little bit of prestige and it gave us a little bit of bump with our core readers. They knew what it was all about. Right. And that takes an intelligence and a smartness and an intuitiveness that you can't understate. The people that go through that site at the leadership position are all uniformly smart. And that's really fucking cool. I never look back at that experience and been like, man, there was sheer incompetence, or man, there was, a lack of intelligence. Like, no, it was intelligent and thoughtful and deliberate all the way through.
Yeah. You threw me in there, so I'll throw you in here. You're going to be my last one. But yeah, shout out to you, of course. My career wouldn't be the same without you. I think that, like you're saying, I think you and me were cut from the same cloth and understood the PlayStation team and had that same mentality. So when we finally were able to be paired up and actually go out and make content that way, whether when it starts as just being a written thing, when it is beyond, obviously it leads to all this, but it's that thing of, when I got sick with cancer, obviously you picked up all the work you needed to, shouldered that load. And then, the fact that you and I, we always talk about being yin and yang and, light and dark with the same coin. And it's the truth. And the fact that we complement each other so well, I think, in terms of everything we do, where you are that you can pull any fucking fact you've ever heard before, right? And I can carry a conversation at any point, and I can be the positive energy. You can be, if we play it up that you're the curmudgeon or whatever, but you can be just Colin about it and not have to worry. Now, granted, if I step out and you have to do something else or host on your own, you can do it too. But that's just what I excel at or whatever in terms of that. And then it's back to the fact of the way we work with people, the way we have relationships with companies, the way we interact with PR and stuff. Like, we're just a good fit, and it's always been that way. But it's the fact that I mean, not to even say here, I wouldn't be nearly as successful in this decade that I've been if it wasn't for you. Because when we got together, it was that perfect team, I felt. Yeah,
it was great. It was a marriage made in heaven, and a professional marriage made in heaven, and a personal marriage made in heaven. And I think that's the thing that's lost on people. I think that there are times where you and I get tired of each other. I think there are times when we're sick of hearing the same things out of each other, or the same, but that's just the nature of the beast. And I feel like, a show that I take, that I really love is Pardon the Interruption, which we reference a lot, with Mike Wilbaum and Tony Kornheiser. These guys have been working together for a very long time. And you can tell that they're buddies. They talk about how, I texted you during the game last night, or the rapport is not quite the same when one of them is on assignment somewhere. Yeah. That even though they probably have their quarrels or they need breaks or whatever, but that they are the best when they're together. Yeah. And I think that's, a great compliment when people talk about, the classic episodes of the Golden Era or whatever, a podcast beyond, like, that's our show. And I'm so glad that people still listen to it. I hope it's bigger and better than ever, but I take a lot of pride in those episodes that we put out. And again, we owe a great deal to people for letting us do that. There was no it wasn't intuitive to be like, take time and do this show that doesn't make any money. And in fact, it's another thing like the history of Naughty Dog where you lose money on it.
There were so many conversations at IGN about maybe we should stop doing podcasts. Maybe podcasts shouldn't exist anymore, because especially when we started talking about man hours that are put into a product, and that applies to the Naughty Dog thing as well as anything else, right? If you have an hour to spend, what can you spend it on that does the most for the community? And when you I want to say customer, I guess reader would be the best way to put it at the time. And so that was the same thing with podcasts, where it was, all right, this is great, and some people took to it so well. And you dial it back a decade, right? And before you got there, like starting Beyond, and when Three Red Lights started, and because forever it was just GameScoop, and it was just Damon and the news team pulling people in and doing GameScoop and all these different podcasts. And I think they had 25 or 30 episodes on everybody before Dunham, when he ascended to be in charge of editorial, was like, every team's going to have a podcast now. And I remember I thought it was the dumbest idea in the world, because now granted, I was a regular on GameScoop, so I was like, whatever. But it was that thing of, no disrespect, like Craig's a great example. Craig Harris, right? Had been at IGN forever, was on the Nintendo team. And I always talk about when I came in, and when you come in too, obviously, we were the kids who had been raised on IGN, and we wanted to do this our whole lives, and had some, we loved in the site. And I always talk about, we came in, and the reason I think we were able to be so successful, you, me, Damon, anybody who came in at that class and wanted it like we wanted it, right, was the reason that the old guard was starting to burn out. Like Craig, I remember, was always like, I don't want to be on video. Like I review DS games. I forget what it was. I remember celebrating Craig's 1,000th review. You know what I mean? Like that's what he did. That's what he loved. That's what he excelled at. Awesome. And so when it was like, we're going to do all this stuff, there was a big backlash of people who were just like, I don't want to go talk in the room. And like, because this isn't easy. I know it seems easy, but
it's not easy at all.
Is anybody who knows it sounds dead that you have to work through all these different things?
Fucking annoying, dude. You're right, Greg. Like, sorry to interrupt, but it's just, no. You're right. Like that's the thing that really does grind my gears sometimes, when it's like, all you guys do is talk about video games. All you guys do is this. I'm like, why don't you come here and sit in this chair? We'll see how well you do. Yeah. Like that, like people beat you up for your mistakes or whatever. I'm like, I talk into a microphone for 10 hours. Yeah. Like I would love to just take some of these random ass internet assholes and just be like, plop them in these seats and be like, go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's see how good you are.
And that was the thing of people who don't want to do it, and then you get that feedback, right? Because people are consuming this as a product from IGN, the gold standard for video games and stuff. And so remember when like Clements came on the show for the first time, like right, and he said like every other word, and like people eviscerated him. He's like, I don't really want to do this. Like, no, we got to, but you got to learn, and you got to get better. And like kids today, these kids trying to do what we do, you know what I mean? You like your Trevor Starkeys or your Alex O'Neills or whoever who make all this content on their own. Whenever they get that shot and they're finally in these chairs, they're going to be great. Because they got to work out all the kinks. And that's why I always say do it. Do everything right now, right? Because you work out all the kinks on your own shows, your friends' shows, all these different things. But when we did it, like, I had done like 2 or 3 podcasts, like appearances in Missouri on a friend's podcast, Sarcastic Gamer. Shout out to them, Matt and Todd. And when I was fucking awful on my first GameScoop and AFK and everything else, like all these things. It was just terrible. But it was the time that nobody else wanted to bat, so you kept getting swings. I could go out there, take your swing, whatever. You know what I mean? Like you weren't great last time, but you maybe can be better now.
Yeah, I it's funny because I was thinking about this particular thing a few days ago, not too long ago at all, where the old adage that you need to do something for 10,000 hours to become a master at it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, we've done this many times over, I think, actually, when you really think about all of the videos, all of the production, all of the podcasts, the various podcasts. I used to be on TRL. We did a music podcast for a while. I did Washington's Beer. When you take all of those kinds of things, combine them together, like we are well past the mastering phase of this particular art. And people can criticize it and say whatever they want, and that's totally fine. But I personally am proud of how far I've come, like you are, with these particular things. And, one of the things that really bothered me was, or one of the things that got to me was when people bust your balls about some of the things you say, or like where, you know what I mean, and all these kinds of things, whatever. And I like to bust your balls about that once in a while, but I don't really notice it. And when I listen to myself, especially when I'm getting passionate or talking fast, I say like and a lot.
Yeah.
And people beat you up for that, and I'm like, I'll sit you in this chair for 5 hours, and I will eviscerate you when you're done, because I will pick out all of the shit that you don't know you do.
Yeah.
And so just as a sidebar, be a little kinder maybe to the people that are doing this kind of content to you, because you really don't know how hard it is. And I'm not saying we're splitting the fucking atom, and I'm not saying that we're doing important work, but we are working, and it's harder than it looks. So So be a little kinder if someone makes a mistake out there, says a lot of things, or has a factual error or whatever, because we're pulling all this shit out of our heads. And there are going to be mistakes made, even on telecasts on NBC or newspapers make mistakes every day. They have an entire section, as you know, dedicated to them. Yeah. So but yeah, so shout out from that era of our life on the editorial side. Shout out to all of those different people that helped us along the way and allowed us to grow and say what we needed to say and do what we needed to do, and to evangelize those games that were great and evangelize the products we believed in and do things like trophy wars and
Eric Hart show,
and
shout out there.
PlayStation conversation, which was an idea I came up with, just a random thing like, what if Greg and I just talked once a day on video?
Shout out to Damon, who was the guy who originally filmed all that and did it.
I remember. I don't think he'll mind me telling this story. I remember you and I we recorded one every day. We must have done. I assume we've done a couple hundred of them. Maybe you did.
No way. Really?
What, like
we stopped doing it at some point daily. I thought early, like in the 30s.
Oh no.
No? Did we go for a long?
I mean, maybe not a couple hundred, but I did a lot of them. Maybe without you.
No.
I did them with Goldfarb and I did them with other people. But
yeah, me too. But okay.
Well, let's say we did 50 of them or 100 of them. The one that stands out to me is we were in the kitchen on the 3rd floor, and we were talking about something. And we were in that little coffee nook.
Yeah.
And Damon was like losing his patience because we kept having to move around because there's people the people in the conference room, people being annoying. And then some guy just walks up and starts making coffee in the middle of the shot. And Damon just literally just takes his camera and walks away. Doesn't even say anything. And I'm like, fucking classic. I remember. I think I feel like we're talking about God of War Ascension or something.
Yeah.
And I like those little random memories I have of the grind of doing those kinds of things. I remember when I did my video about Mass Effect 3, which is a notorious video on the internet, that we originally looked at it and it was way longer and had way more context.
Yeah.
The Mass Effect 3 video, people that don't know, you can go look it up. It was my rant about the endings, calling everyone babies and doing what I do, but a little less mature than I would have liked. You can see my conversation with Jim Sterling about that video on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. But I remember looking at the original cut that Damon did, and I was like, and I liked it a lot. It had context. It explained everything. There was no jump cuts and everything was too long or whatever. And then we cut it all up and it became what it became.
Yeah.
Then we put it out and I'm like, that was a fucking huge mistake. Yeah. So
the PlayStation conversation I think of all the time, because it was like, I don't know. Now I mean, even at the time, there was such a difference for me performing doing GameScoop versus Beyond, right? And like in the early days of Beyond, it was similar, but even with GameScoop, I was with Damon, and it was just us, and it was Hillary or whoever, and it's just trying to make each other laugh and be a fucking bunch of idiots, and I'm using like the fan, like I'm at the airport, and all these dumb things, right? And then Beyond was more like I'm with my boss, I want to be this, and then like, and even when Roper took over, it was like, all right, cool, and we were still crazy and obnoxious and weird, but then when I took it over and started hosting it, then I needed to be the serious guy and keep that show on task and stuff. The PlayStation conversation I always go back to was the one where I went and played Last of Us. And I came back to tell you about it, but they didn't give us B-roll, remember? So we're in the middle of it, and I'm like, here, let me just reenact it. I took your hand, and I slammed it down as Joel would, and then I acted like I stabbed myself. And I was like, doing this thing, like I was bleeding out the neck or whatever. And like I loved it so much, and it reminded me so much of an old Dave Clayman story of when I think it was, you probably have more context because it was before my time, but when they went and saw, I want to say Ninja Gaiden on Xbox, and the same thing that happened where they're like, we're not going to give you footage. So they came back and they bought Dave a ninja suit, and he enacted it, and they put it up, and 15 minutes later footage came. They're like, please put up a different preview. Don't make it like that. There's no reason for you to do that. Please stop what you're doing.
At least they twisted Tecmo Koei's arm, or Koei Tecmo at the time.
Yeah. But that was back in the day, man, of like anything went there at IGN. I mean, shout out to Dave Clayman for sure. Shout out to Ty Root for walking around and filming us doing dumb stuff all the time.
Yeah, I remember the first video I was ever on was the first person shooter video from 2007 with they would go around with the Nerf gun.
Oh,
the
the
bow
Nerf
and arrow,
Wars,
and they,
Nerf
and, yeah, and they
Wars.
nailed me in the balls
Yeah.
and ruined my Final Fantasy Tactics poster, which I was pretty pissed about. But it was a good time. It was a great place to work. I'm sure it still is a great place to work. A great place to at least get started for people and make a name for yourself. And I'm super thankful for that experience and
100%.
the people that I met there. And I was reflecting recently about just some of the people that I was so close with that I've lost touch with that I still have a great affection for. I don't know why I don't really talk to them anymore. Ryan Geddes, Clayman and Brudvig, we mentioned them. Some of the guys I still see tangentially, but not very often. Charles,
Sure.
Sin, Ty, Baranon. I'll see them for the Super Bowl. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think it was a blessing. I've said it many times. I'm 32 years old now. There's no better time or no better place and to have spent my 20s than at IGN. Sure. I mean, what an amazing reflection when I'm 50 or 60, if I make it that long, I don't die of a fucking heart attack first. To be like, wow,
diets, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. But but what an amazing, people really work shitty jobs and work extremely hard, and I worked hard. I worked very hard.
Yeah.
But they work extremely hard physically. They work physically demanding, mentally very demanding jobs, very exhausting jobs, emotionally taxing. They have to go home and deal with shit they don't want to. They can barely rub two pennies together. They're living paycheck to paycheck. I never had that experience. I mean, I had the paycheck to paycheck experience for a little while until I was smart about my money. But so that was never lost on me either. That I had a series of advantages that frankly I made for myself, but nonetheless they were advantages, and I took advantage of them.
We haven't given an official shout out to Ryan Clements.
Of course. And Goldfarb as well.
Of course, Dark Knight of News. Yeah, of course. I'll never forget when Clements came, and he was just so fucking nice. And goddamn, did I hate him. And I've told the story before, but I mean, like, it was so, and it was, I think, more in the early days when I was there, and we still were like a clique. IGN was a clique, you know what I mean? But man, I always talk about it. We were a group of cats, and every new cat that came in, you hissed at and you hated for a while, and then one day it's just a light switch happened. You're like, all right, you're family now. You're cool. Don't worry about it. We're all totally fine.
Yeah, it is. It's fun. It's funny. I mean, I can say that it wasn't like that when we left, but it was also because there was so much turnover compared. Like it was really like. A pack of dogs or whatever, and you don't. Who's this new dog? That's like trying to this established family. It's a little skeptical, and some people didn't make it. Like there were some people that came and went very quickly.
Sure.
But most people came in there and went through the meat grinder a little bit. And
by the end, and I think we were in a very special place because all the names you mentioned, Baradon and Brodvig and all these different people, like. There was an injection of new blood there where even if I think it was Craig and Nick and Charles, like they had beaten me there by like a year, you know what I mean, of establishing themselves. But we were all still young enough that we were going out all the time and doing all these different things. And so that was always my thing when we got to our end at IGN, where it was like, I definitely didn't feel that way with our group anymore. I felt that way with you and the people who had left, and I would still go out or whatever, do it. But like the new people coming in, like, we're leaving at what? I was 31, 30 when we're leaving, and it's like you bring in a 22, 24-year-old. It's like
they don't want anything.
They're doing whatever they want to go do. I'm not gonna go like, hey, what's going on, Brian and Leah? Let's go out and do things.
Yeah, it would have been heartbreaking if I had left when we were still that big family that we were familiar with. And my only sadness when I left came from leaving the people behind, and I wrote a huge long email to a handful of the leadership there, just thanking them for all the experience. I was really sad leaving them, and didn't want them to think that I was forgetting what they did for me.
Sure. I wrote a company-wide email that said "Get fucked" and send.
So I didn't leave. Apart from the people that got the email and a few other people that I individually talked to, I'm like, I don't really know anyone here anymore, even, and so that made it a little bit easier to leave. It was hard to let go. It really was like. It was hard to see my IGN email address turned off.
Yeah.
It was hard
100%.
to. I had that email address since 2004. It was hard to see to get my key card taken away, to get my laptop taken away, all these normal things, but it wasn't a normal job.
But that was home. That was, you know what I mean? That was your second home, and then for me, a lot of times my first in terms of just how much time I spent there. But like, I think it was that we had. Quietly, without us really noticing, the people that had made it a home, and this isn't a knock against anybody there, had been peeled away. Where it was like, we're talking about, there's so much turnover, and you get to the end, and it's like, especially with you and me leaving, and Nick and Tim leaving with us and stuff, we weren't saying goodbye to these people. Because I remember for me, it was I remember leaving on my final day at IGN, and it was because me and Nick worked through the Christmas break or whatever, so we didn't have to take burn any of our vacation days. And then when we finally left, and I had like put stuff in Nick's trunk, and we got in the car and we pulled, and just as we pulled out and left, he was like, "You doing okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And like like the one man tier, which was like hard to believe for me, right? But the difference being that when that final giant round of layoffs had come through, and like right after the PlayStation 4 event, and Clements went, and then that day Charles quit. Charles grabbed me and pulled me into a room, and he's like, "Hey, dude, like, I just wanted you to know I'm leaving." And I was like, "No," and I just like wept, and because it wasn't Charles, it was Charles and Clements, and the not knowing it, but like the fact that it was over now. You know what I mean? It was no longer what it was. Not that again, I'm knocking what it was. It evolved into something else.
Yeah, people there have their own thing now.
At some point, we grew up and became adults there, and so like it was like when we got there. God, what a not adult workplace we. You know what I mean?
It was outrageous. It got less outrageous the more time went on.
Exactly,
but it was completely outrageous.
Because that was the thing. A real adult started showing up, and it was like, well, we can't say that. We can't do that. Oh my god,
it was incredibly outrageous.
Yeah, like we just did
audacious,
stupidest shit. Like fucking people.
It was awesome.
Stealing kegs from piece of fucking security cam footage. I'm like, we can't do this. You can't do this.
There are so many stories that like
you can never tell. Yeah.
I want to segue to
get outside of IGN.
I want to segue to we were talking about PR, and I want to segue to PR. For people that don't know, PR, public relations, is we Greg and I are very well connected in the industry, so we know lots of developers and lots of publishers and lots of people at all these companies we can go to, but to do it the right way, you go through PR. So if we need a game or we need access or we have a question, we
want to
email
book somebody correctly on a show.
We go to PR. We could email Shuhei Yoshida directly, but they don't like that very much.
They get real mad.
Yeah, they actually get incredibly mad when you do that. So the PR people are the gatekeepers, and each company has a series of them. Sony has a dozen of them or so, but smaller companies like Deep Silver, for instance, it's Will Powers is the guy that you'd really go to, and he has some third party PR people that help him more.
He's got another guy too now, doesn't he? I thought.
Not that I've ever dealt with.
I can picture his face. He was at GameStop Expo, I thought.
I don't know. I can't even remember what I did last night.
Shout out to you then.
So the point I'm making here is that there's a group of people that kind of I want to say unsung heroes. Their jobs are very glamorous and probably super stressful, especially when they're not working on games. These people aren't stupid. They know when their games suck, and they know when But I've had, with rare exception, and none of the people I'm going to talk about today, great experiences with the professionals in this industry that have given us access and given us 1,000 games and have given us all these things that we've asked for, and have always really appreciated the work that they've done. And so I want to give specific shout outs, and I'm sure you mimic this.
Yeah, totally. I don't steal my
well, I mean, Sony.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thing, is when I think of my decade and I get outside of IGN, I immediately think of Jen Clark and Alyssa Casella from PlayStation. And now, of course, I know that, the internet and the hate and whatever you want to do. I'm not saying anything about, here's the why they get a shout out, right? Is that they've been there since my day one. And not only have they been there since my day one, they've treated me the same the entire way through, with nothing but respect. And when I early on proved myself, I know what I'm talking about, so that when they are mad that I emailed Shuhei, or that, and this is what we always talk about, right? They've never looked at a review I've done, and I'm talking about Lair, I'm talking about PlayStation 4 Pro. I'm not even a review, but when I have an unpopular opinion, I'm not penalized for it. I'm not. They don't not send me stuff.
No, they've never docked us ever.
Exactly, and that'd be a real easy move to do. And I remember specifically in my early days when Kotaku did something I forgot, and then quote unquote got blackballed by Sony.
Oh, they leaked PlayStation Home.
And then and that's it. And then they came into a meeting and Phil gave him brass ball. Phil Harrison gave him brass balls or something, right? And I was like, oh fuck, that's the kind of thing that happens here, and it never ever happened to me. And when we were getting ready to jump for Kind of Funny, I remember having that moment of well, here we go. And I don't mean PlayStation or Jen or Alyssa. I mean, here we go industry wide. Did we get treated well because we were IGN, or did we get treated well because we were respected and people knew they could trust us?
And we found the answer real quick.
And exactly. And that's been the thing. But for Jen and Alyssa, I just did, as of the recording of this yesterday, I was down in LA for Horizon, right? And there's Alyssa, and we're like, oh, hey. And it was that thing where we ran into each other at the coffee shop across the street when she came in with all of Guerrilla Games, right? And so immediately Herman, shout out to Herman, grabbed me and we started talking off in a corner or whatever. And 98% of it was oh yeah, what's going on with your son? Da, 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 you know what I mean? Bullshitting around about our lives or whatever. But again, Alyssa didn't come over and freak out and pull him away or anything. You know what I mean? They know that even if Herman was going to be yeah, man, we canceled Horizon. I wasn't going to leak that or go throw that out. I understand the relationship and how this works.
And they knew that. I mean, with Sony first party, they know. We know a ton of shit, right? And we really don't leak it. Yeah. I think they know that by now.
Yeah.
Because we've also told them when we go out to dinner, every once in a while we go out to dinner, I'm like, by the way, we knew about this, and this. So
that was that. I will leave all the names redacted from this story, but we went out to dinner with some people when we met them for the first time or whatever, and I'll never forget that, where they kept trying to be guarded. And finally I turned to the one guy and I'm like, God of War Ascension is, the next God of War game is multiplayer. There's all these different factions. That game you guys keep teasing is The Last of Us. It's by Naughty Dog. And I just went down the list of 2 or 3 other things. And he just looked at me and was like, wow, they really do tell you everything. And we were fine, and it's never been an issue since.
No, I got to give a shout out to Jen and Alyssa as well. When I took over IGN PlayStation, they dealt with a different person than Greg, a person who was less reserved, and Greg's way more, I think it's fair to say, way more metered than I am. The thing that bothers me, one of the things that bothers me when people reflect on what we do is like a PlayStation fanboys. I'm like, you're a fucking idiot if you think that. Sony certainly doesn't think that of us. And there is, and I will stand by this till the fucking day I die. There is not one PlayStation centric anything that is as hard in that company as we are. Period. End of story. And anyone who's listened to us for a long time knows that, and Sony sure as hell knows that as well. And the thing that I appreciate so much about them, about Alyssa, about Jen Dean, who's one of my favorites. She's always treated me with respect. She's always, no matter what I've said, I've hated some games she's worked on. I've talked a lot of shit about a lot of games, a lot of hardware. They've always treated me with respect.
Yep.
They've always treated me very nicely.
Brian Keltner is another name that jumps.
Keltner's
great. Another guy who's like there from the beginning with me in terms of, and he actually went to Capcom and then came back to PlayStation. But I'll never ever forget, because the old IGN thing would be like, we all, especially from the early days, was we wanted exclusives, right? And after I kind of fucked Lair, we got the exclusive and I hated the game when we put it up. Sony again wasn't mad at us, and maybe they would have done them, I don't know, but because it was like my first main review. But then the conversation was kind of like, we still want to work with you guys for exclusive reviews, but can we only do it if you like the game? And not that you're going to give it a 10, not a score-based thing, but if you're going to shit on it like you just did Lair, can you just go to embargo or whatever, if that's going to be it? And so I'll never forget hitting up Keltner when I played Secret Agent Clank. And I was like, hey, dude, don't like it, not going to pursue it. And he's like, oh, shit, really? I'm like, yeah, this is paraphrasing emails. And he was just like, all right, thanks for letting me know. And it wasn't like, let me get you on the phone with the developers, and they're going to talk you down and tell you why. And like,
never.
Okay,
that never happens. And that's the thing. I can't speak for everyone's experience with Sony or with everyone else, but I know that having reviewed many of this company's products, having sent, and they'll tell you 1,000 fucking emails to them, having
have a nice day.
Having interact.
Well.
I mean, yeah, hope you're well. Take care. I mean, I always they make fun of me over at Sony, nonetheless. Everyone else with the way I fucking write emails.
Because I'm in the other room. Yeah. You know I'm well. You haven't heard Portillo burrow through me yet.
I'm afraid that if I don't end my emails that way, something bad will happen.
It's the last time you talked to me, you're like, I didn't wish you well.
It was so having dealt with this ecosystem and these people, and people have come and gone. There have been people, Michael Marconi, we were just talking about, who's a great guy that worked over there.
Jill Weber was always...
Jill Weber was the original...
Jill Weber, and this is, I guess, goes to just as a lesson for your life, whether you're in video games or not. I remember when I started, and it would be dealing with Jill about, because I'm the lowest guy in that totem pole, so we're talking about the most bullshit PSP game or whatever it was, and to have that relationship go from that to, I'm reviewing Uncharted 2, and then I think she worked on 3, right? Yeah, Uncharted 2 and 3. Well, I wasn't reviewing Uncharted 2. Doesn't matter. We worked on 2 Uncharted games at the top level because we had both risen that way. You know what I mean? It was like, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. There's Aram Jabari, who worked at Atlas for a long time, and then works at Sony, a really consummate professional, really great guy, very knowledgeable about video games, very knowledgeable about technology. These people... Alex Armour, Ron Eagle, Claudia. I mean, there's Claudine rather. There's a bunch of people back in the day that we dealt with, even back when Sony. For people that don't know, Sony San Diego in their office a long time ago had their own PR staff that was apart from the San Mateo office, which eventually they folded in. Eric Levine, Eric Smith was a great guy. Jacob Jones is a great guy. Al De Leon. These are all people.
Oh yeah, Maritime.
These are all people. These are all names to you guys that you'll never deal with ever. But these are people that when we need access, when we need to answer a question for you guys, when we need a game to talk about, we need a comment. They've always treated us professionally and with respect and with courtesy. And if they have nothing to say, and when they're mad, they'll say it. And when they have a question, they'll ask us. And when we see them in person, they'll ask, "What did you think of this?
Yeah.
What can we do better here?" And it's because they care. It's not. I've always, having dealt with lots of PR people, good people, some PR, there's been a couple of experiences I've had that, again, I'm not going to talk about, that have been fucking atrocious. And nothing like untoward, just people that are assholes, right? Nothing crazy. Just people are assholes.
Yeah.
But these people have never been assholes to us. And they're a little piece of the pie that makes this shit run. Not from an influence perspective, not from a perspective of saying like, give it this or else, or do this and we're never going to send you anything or anything like that. But from a perspective of like, these guys have a voice, these guys have an audience that cares about our products, and we are going to facilitate that as best as we can in the most professional way that we can. And that's why we go out once, twice a year and have dinner with them. That's why we, try to keep in touch with them. When I was talking about Jen Dean, who is a PR person I've been dealing with a long time there, and you too. When she's a huge Raiders fan, and when I see the Raiders on, I'm like, oh, when they made the playoffs, I texted her congratulations. I'm like, that's so fantastic. Over time, these people become the facilitators of just helping you do a fraction of your job better.
Yeah.
And they deserve more credit. And I hate the insinuations that there's untoward things. Again, I can't speak to the other people's experiences. I don't know what the fuck other people do or what happened. But I know in my own experience, that kind of shit that you hear about or you read about never happens. It never even approached happening.
Yeah.
Because these people are just also doing their job.
And it's that thing where, you know, we're talking about answer your question, doing this. Like, again, the Horizon event for me yesterday, in the future for you. The fact that PR got everyone down there. PR set up all the times. PR makes all those stations work. Alyssa, who's PR, is walking around. They're making sure that everyone gets equal time with them. They're checking you in. They're giving you hard drives. They're taking care of this. They're making sure the hard drives get down. On top of just the technical level, they're making sure no one's filming the screen. No one's doing this. They know the like
these people. You have to understand. I mean, I want to give a shout out to another one of my friends in the industry who's a PR person, John Harden, who's Atlas, who took over for Atlas after Aram left, and also does Sega now.
Do you want to do rapid fire PR people?
Yeah.
So we keep talking about that. I mean, there's that. There's Sean Norton. You want to?
Sean Norton, of
Sandbox
course.
Strategy, who's done a
buddy
million
of ours.
different games, all sorts of stuff.
Great guy.
Yeah.
I want to say just quickly with John Harden.
Oh, Alicia Kim. Sorry, I thought we were going back.
No.
Rapid fire.
I just not too rapid fire. Like
Okay, sorry.
like it's like powder. We're loading the powder in the like rapid fire in like the 1750s. So I wanted to say, because I want to say this, like, these people deal with some fucking idiots and some assholes that are looking to do anything that is against the embargo or things that they don't want you to do. And I'm not saying that like they don't want you to write bad about things about the games. So like they don't want you to take off-screen footage. They don't. John Harden always tweets out like, you have 5 followers on your YouTube channel. Stop acting like, or stop selling the keys we're giving. These are the things that these people have to deal with that you don't think about. Like that people are tricking them into giving you them keys so they can go sell them on a website. Or, you know, it's not just this front-facing things with normal people that deal with games in a normal way. They have to sift through the bullshit. And they also have to deal with the realities of the fact that not all their games are good, and they know. That's the thing. It's like they do things, as we said before, called mock reviews. That's usually collaboration between an outside party, PR, and marketing to see what a game, what a reviewer would think of a game, so they have some sort of preparation. So they're not stupid when a game, when a game like Homefront, the Revolution comes out. Everyone knows that game's gonna be terrible. We don't know until we play it, but they know. And they have to do their best and put their best face forward. I guess what I'm saying is for the marketing and PR people, they're kind of the unsung heroes of the whole situation because they are the gatekeepers. But I think that they've far more often than not been consummate professionals to us and treated us with a great deal of respect. But anyway, so that's the musket is now loaded. You can now talk about Alicia Kim.
No, I mean, I was just going to name names. I thought you were going to a much more broad of like this, of like people are. And it's one of those, like, we could be here all day listing PR people, so I was just going to throw names out.
Sure.
We can just keep saying PR people and move on.
PR people. Alicia Kim's great. Bethesda's team's great. Tracy and all of them. I'm quite fond of the PR, third-party PR agencies that deal with companies like Tecmo Koei. The NIS guys are fucking fantastic. Alan Costa and those guys are awesome people, really professional, give us great access to their games.
Everyone at Xbox. We're talking about PlayStation or PlayStation
I'll tell you,
right now.
I'll tell you, yeah.
It's one of those things, like, that was the other thing. When we left, it was like, okay, what's going to happen with Nintendo and Xbox, because we don't have relationships with those. We didn't cultivate those over 10 years because it wasn't our beat. And the way everyone reached out. Now, I mean, I talked to Jeff Rubenstein, formerly of the PlayStation blog. Shout out to Sid Schumann, Justin Massigo, Ryan Clements again, Ray Gutierrez from, back then. But I mean, like, Jeff, even before he got there, everybody at Xbox was ready to help us out and do whatever. Rich over at Nintendo. Like, there's so many people who understand what this is and what we are and what we've done in a decade and why they should be part of it and help us out.
Yeah, there's been
PR could go on forever.
And that's what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, and that's why I think it's so interesting. Just give you a little glimpse of it. Like, these are the people that we deal with.
Yeah.
And you end up having a rapport with them. You end up having your own little relationship with them, your own little friendship. And it's productive and allows the wheels to be greased so that they rotate, and don't grind against each other in ways that stymie the ability of us to do our jobs. And so, have we butted heads with these people before? Yes.
It's like any other relationship.
But of course, that is part of the process and shows how honest and forthright it is. And I think that's really great. I want to give getting out of the PR realm. And because we're running into the hour mark here, and I know we want to go for the normal 90 minutes or whatever. Moving over maybe to the dev side or whatever.
Oh, sure.
I want to start with Shuhei Yoshida, who's a listener of this podcast, who you and I know very well, and I've had really remarkable experiences with. And he's just it cannot be understated how much of a nice man he is, and how very little we talk about video games with him. And that's one of the cool things. When we've had the pleasure of having dinner with him. I had dinner with him twice in Tokyo. we don't talk about games. Like, he's just an interesting man with an interesting background, living an interesting life. And yet,
when he came over for dinner with you, when you were there, but it was mainly, you know, when Jen was cooking and my mom was there, having Shuhei like when he came in and we just all started shooting the shit, talking to my mom about him having twins. You know what I mean? Like, that was so cool. Because I mean, first off, I've talked to Shu about his family a million times, or whatever. But to have him talking to my mom about that, you know what I mean, and how natural that is, because the whole thing with Shu, you know, begins from when I first got on Twitter and we put up a podcast Beyond and Shuhei responded to me. And I think it was Clements who came over and was like, do you know who just said that they listened to the show? And I'm like, this Japanese guy? And he's like, yeah, click it. And he's like, oh, President Sony Worldwide Studios, which sounds so laughable now. But Shuhei wasn't in press conferences and he wasn't out in front of the camera and he wasn't doing all this stuff. And if you ask him, he'll tell you we being Podcast Beyond and the best friends and everything else are a big reason that happened, is because we like, oh, fuck, okay, well, we need to interview him at E3. And then I'll never forget, you went to it was when you were sick when we thought you had Crohn's. And I remember going to the bathroom and opening the door and being like, Colin, we gotta go. And you're like, I'm almost done. And you came out, and then it was me and Clements walking, and I had my notebook, and I had written out Shu, S-H-O-E, hey, H-E-Y, yo, she, and Clements kept quizzing me as we walked over and over because I'm so bad. I was so afraid of fucking it up. But then we got there, and it was so natural because it wasn't bullshit. He hadn't blown smoke. He hadn't listened to that one episode. He knew every fucking inside joke. He knew everything about us already because he was a true fan.
Yep.
And that's when it was off to the races on that relationship where it was. And the fact, what I always hang my hat on, right, is that first off, I love the support you guys give us. I love that we're the #1 PlayStation podcast. That's awesome. What means even more to me is the amount of people in the PlayStation community who make the PlayStation games who listen to this. Obviously, we're going to talk about Scott Rhodey.
Yeah,
the fact
of course,
that,
a great guy.
I mean, developers, whether Neil Druckmann, I can go down the list of developers who will text me something or say something to me that are my friends or DM me if they just know me through this, like Jaffe. You know what I mean? These people who legitimately listen to the show, not because of, oh God, I gotta listen to these guys. Clearly we have something going on. Clearly our opinions matter in some level to what we're talking about.
I mean, clearly our opinions matter. And that's I know bothers some people, but I also know that that's uplifting to a lot of our audience who feels in a way that we speak for them because they can't speak.
That's the thing. I don't exactly, because they don't have this angle. It's not that our opinions matter because we move units or we do this. Our opinions matter because we're the barometer of you, the listener, or the viewer. Theoretically, if you're watching the show and consuming the show, you agree with one of us on certain issues.
Or you love to disagree. It's the same reason people love Stephen A. Smith or watched Undisputed with Sharp and whatever Bayless. You know?
There's something here in you that we're a barometer for the community in some way, shape, or form, and that's why I think people probably start to listen because it's popular. They want to know what people are going on, but then you get deeper into it that hopefully we're providing entertainment as well.
Definitely. So a shout out to Shuhei, a shout out, as you said, to Scott Rhodey, who I think is a really great guy, really funny dude. We got
to get him in for just a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah, I agree.
This shout out show is about a whole bunch of different moments, right? Obviously, Beyond 300 revealing Shuhei and the way that place went crazy, right? And that was such a loud, awesome moment. It's great on camera and all these different things. Maybe just as powerful but super understated was at the end of that night when we finally finished autographs and we're walking back, Scott Rhodey sitting there in a chair and like 15 kids in chairs around him just talking to them about PlayStation and what's going on behind the scenes. And it's like, holy fuck. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like, I can't believe he'd do that. Of course Scott would do that. It's just such an awesome opportunity that, like, when we talk about why PlayStation resonates and why it's this thing and what it is and why they can do a PSX, that's why they can do a PSX. Because not only do they care that much, the audience cares that much that they're going to, yes, let's sit here and fucking talk, whatever you want to tell us. Let's talk about your fucking PlayStation shoes, Scott. Seems like an obsession.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. He's a PlayStation cat, man. I'll tell you. Gio Corsi, we already know, have a great affection for Gio Corsi, who's one of the great minds in the industry, I think, and just a really funny and friendly guy. And he deserves a shout out as a fan of the show as well. And then, getting down, have we ever told the You Don't Got It Man story?
No. Should we leave names out of it, you think?
No, let's not tell it then, because if we can't tell it the way it's
yeah, I don't.
It's a funny story. One day, we should ask them if we can.
Next time we talk to them about games, we should do it because that is one that I just texted you the other night about it because it's just
that's really one of the funniest things that ever happened in front of both of us.
And that speaks to the fact of we're starting to talk about devs and the stress that they are under at all times to make their game awesome, to make it fun for fans to make it present well and like the things that come in and out of that. And I think that also steps into the fact of like, my Game Awards speech, right? Like I always talk about it. That came around at an interesting time for me because what I had been thinking about doing, because it was kind of funny in community, we could do whatever the fuck we wanted and didn't have to worry anymore. Leading into that, before I ever got nominated for the award, I had been kicking around this idea of a chain letter YouTube video that I was going to do. That would be the video would start and it would be me and I'd be like, "Hey, game developer, you don't know me. Maybe you know me. Maybe you don't. Don't worry. If you do," I was basically going to thank them, explain to them how much this all matters, and tell them this video isn't monetized. This video isn't public. It's unlisted. I want you to share it to other game developers in your thing because everybody, I think, needs encouragement at some point. Because for me, and this is all personal baggage, probably, like there is there's a bullshit to you and I being popular and successful. Because all we do is talk about other people's creations.
Yep.
And the fact, like, the great example, and like, this is the example yesterday, Horizon event at that coffee shop. I went off with Herman and we're sitting there talking, right? And we literally had that thing. He was like,
and just to be clear, you're talking about Herman Holst, who's the head
Gorilla. Right.
Gorilla. Okay.
And we just gotten off the thing. He's like, "Oh, you guys are doing it so well. I see you everywhere. It must be cool." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's fun." Blah, blah, blah. And then like literally 5 minutes later, a kid was came and got his coffee and sat down. He turned around. He's like, "I'm sorry, are you Greg?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Hey, I'm Eric. I'm a lawyer. I'm like, "Oh." And I thought he was like a games journal person at first because that happens now because I'm so old. People all the time come up to me like, "Oh man,
you Greg?
I got into."
I'm Greg.
He's young.
Wait. Are you Greg? I'm Greg. There we go. I got a little bit better there.
But they come in like, "I got into this because of you." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I've been around long enough for somebody to say that." But I was like, "Oh, you're not. Oh no, you're just here for coffee. Oh, that's fucking." He's like, "What are you doing down here?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm about to see Horizon." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I hear you and Greg talk about that, or Colin talk about that all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah," and Herman's like, you should probably tell him like when the release date is. I'm like, "Yeah." And then finally, this is Herman. He makes the game. He's like, "Oh, cool, thanks. All right, bye." And I'm like, "What the fuck, man?" Like the entire team of like that made the narrative, and it's like,
yeah, it is very frustrating.
And that's what I feel like, not if I was a game developer, if there have to be game developers, there have to be a time in their lives when they see us doing all this dumb stuff, or like they see us at PAX or PSX and we're getting security walking us around, all this dumb shit, and they're like, "Motherfucker, I'm just trying to get you to play this indie game," like, and not a chip on their shoulder, because I don't think it's
confusing.
It's undeserved that they're like, "Why are these people?" Like, they didn't.
Well, it's a funneling of we. It sounds strange, but we do all this so that you can just experience it in one place, right? Like it's not possible for you to jet set and see Herman Holst and then do this and this and this. And so I think that's kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's not unique. There are people very famous to talk about what other people do in politics. There are people very famous to talk about what other people do in sports. There are, But I agree with you, but I feel like it's way more nascent in our industry, and that's why.
And the thing about it is, like in politics, okay, James Carville or whoever, fucking Clinton. These are people you would recognize and see.
James Carville's your example. Okay.
I love James Carville, man.
The engineer of the 1992 Clinton election. Okay, Greg, thanks.
But like sports is the same way, right? Like Hunter Pence or whatever.
Right.
Like there's standouts there, and there's standouts for game devs too.
Absolutely.
But even that said, I still bet if we're walking around, I'm probably gonna get I'm talking about in real life. I bet I get stopped more than Neil Druckmann gets stopped.
Yeah, which is unfortunate and unfair. That's another shout out, by the way. Neil Druckmann, a really great guy.
We're gonna get to Naughty Dog, right?
Let's just go through.
Neil Druckmann, Bruce Straley, of course, Amy, of course, before she left.
Now over to EA. Amazing.
Christoph and Evan are the exact same thing, honestly. Where I remember being starstruck the first time it was after Uncharted, and it wasn't Game Awards. I don't think it was something in LA like that though. And they were like, we ran each other stepping out, and they were like, "Oh, you want to sit and talk?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah." And like now it's a friendship, but I mean like to sit there and interact with them on that level, and like for them not to think it's a big deal, you know what I mean? Like it was like that. I mean, so all of them, David Ballard, of course, now Kurt. I feel like we're gonna miss so many people. Arnie, Scott Lowe, but he doesn't count. Scott Lowe's a washout.
Yeah, we are gonna miss people, and we apologize about that. But just Naughty Dog has treated us with a great deal of respect. They invited me into their doors for a week, in which I saw things that I shouldn't have seen and knew things that I shouldn't have known, and they trusted me with that, and I did not. I wasn't there to tell that story, and I didn't tell that story.
Yeah.
Specifically, that it was clear as the day is long that they were working on Uncharted 4 when I was there, long before it was announced. And I was just, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to tell your story. I'm not here to talk about Uncharted 4, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
That's kind of the rapport you build. I could have scored a huge exclusive and then never had any contact with them again. And that's not who I am, and that's not. I'm not trying to ruin people. I'm not trying to do that kind of thing. And so they've always treated us with a great deal of respect. Insomniac has Marcus Smith, James Stevenson, Ted Price, ton of people over there. Drew Murray, a bunch of people over there have been very great to us, and we really love them as well.
And that's another great example of everything I'm talking about, where it was PSX in San Francisco last year, so 2 years ago now, but where I just won the Game Award and I got in the elevator with Kevin to go get something from somebody's room in the W, and as we got on, Ted Price got on. He's like, oh, hey, Greg, blah, blah, and we bullshit. He's like, congratulations. And he walked out and we went back down. I'm like, Kevin, do you, not to insult Kevin, but I'm like, do you know who that was? And he's like, no. I'm like, fuck. And he's like, who was it? I'm like, he's in charge of Insomniac. He does this, and he knows me, and he wants to talk to me.
Yeah,
and get my opinion on the day's events.
It's very cool.
Yeah, and we're very lucky and very blessed about it.
I want to give a personal shout out to Hideo Baba and Keiji Inafune. Hideo Baba is in charge of the Tales franchise, and Inafune obviously speaks for himself. These people have both been very nice to me. It is bizarre that Inafune knows who I am.
Sure.
And it is bizarre that Hideo Baba, who doesn't really speak any English at all, just comes up to me and shakes my hand or whatever because he knows I'm a Tales fan. With just our couple of interactions in Japan and a couple of interactions in the States, these people are very friendly.
Yeah.
Ben Judd, Iga.
Yep.
These are very, very nice people to us. Iga, Ben Judd, as we said, when the day before they launched the Kickstarter for Ritual of the Night, they were in our living room eating burritos. Iga's eating burrito.
I know exactly where the story's going.
Iga doesn't speak English at all. He's not like Inafune, where Inafune kind of understands what you're saying, but he's embarrassed kind of to speak it. Iga doesn't speak English. Common rookie mistake with California burritos, or burritos generally, if you don't eat them a lot, because I've seen my own friends from the East Coast do it, is that they start to unwrap the entire thing out of the foil. And you're like, no, don't do that. Like, eat it and unwrap a little more.
Down.
And Ego was unwrapping the whole thing. I was like, no. Because it all falls apart. It ruins the burrito. And he was like scared. Like, and I was like, I had to talk to Ben. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Please translate.
Please translate immediately that I was not. I'm trying to help him keep it. And he started laughing or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's Kojima. And like the funny thing about Kojima in this instance is that I have the photo on my phone still, right? But like to show you this progression of our careers. Obviously, I start, and as I've always said, Metal Gear is like this huge, thing for me. It changed my life and put me on this path when I was starting to deviate, I think. And to go from that to, oh my God, I'm reviewing Peace Walker. How fucking cool is that? And I think it was the next E3, maybe 2 later, and you and I were in line for the PlayStation E3 conference when it was outside. It was Shrine. No. It was when we were outside walking to I think it was the sports.
The same place it always was.
Yeah. But okay. Anyways, we're outside where they have the food trucks and all that shit. But we're in line, and you and I were in line. I look back, I'm like, holy shit, that's fucking Hideo Kojima behind us. And you're like, is it? And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm like, we were both like, we got to do this. We got to take the photo. And like, I know
it's such a bad picture too.
I know, exactly. And so I would turn around like, hey, Kojima, and he was with Ken, who now I can count as a friend or whatever. But at the time, like, none of these people know us from Adam really, because we're just names on a byline or voices on a podcast.
Especially if you're in Japan, you don't read our media at all.
And so it was that thing where you could tell they were like, and then we handed them business cards and they said IG, and they're like, oh, okay, these guys aren't completely crazy. And we took that photo, and it was like, wow, how awesome was that? And then you jump ahead years later to the PlayStation 4 launch event in New York or whatever, and I had been, of course, trying to get Kojima on Up at Noon forever, and it never ever happened just because of how hard it is and how busy he is, and he was never through San Francisco. And he was at that event though, and we scored an interview there. And so we go up to the hotel suite that they're showing Phantom Pain, or it must have been Ground Zeroes. They were showing Ground Zeroes content on PlayStation 4, and I think, don't quote me. And cool, we weren't there to play the game. We'd already played it somewhere else, and so it was just there to do the interview. And so we'd packed 2 wireless mics, and so it was like, okay, it's not going to be like me and Caleb were talking. All right, it's not going to be an interview. I'll be behind the camera. I'll ask the question until we'll repeat them back. It'll be him and his translator. And so this is when I'm wearing the shirts and ties to all the events anyways and stuff. I like that period of my life before I was like, fuck it, I just don't care again. I
rubber banded as well. I used to try to dress nicer, and I was like, I don't really care.
That was the thing when I was like getting ready for that event yesterday at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, I'm not putting on a collared shirt. They'll be fine. But anyways, we set it up, and I'll never forget it. Sat them both down in front of the camera. I sat behind the camera, and Kojima turns to his translator like, and the translator turns to me and he goes, Mr. Kojima would like to know why we're not getting the full Greg Miller experience. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm like, he knows Up at Noon. And like, oh, he watches it all the time. And I'm like, holy shit, are you fucking kidding me? Of like, what from that PlayStation event, but I mean from the first time when I'll never forget playing Metal Gear Solid 1 and the screen goes black and it popped up in the green text Hideo and then it went small like your TV did at the time. And being like, why does it say? And like a friend explained it to me and I was like, wow, what a fucking world. To then jump ahead to that, our final E3 at IGN where I gave him the painting somebody had sent me of Peace Walker and stuff. And then now in the past for you, but to go to RTX Sydney for us next week and have a 2-hour one-on-one interview with Hideo Kojima, like who is now like I consider a friend. Like right when he came through his first tour of Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain after I guess it was about to be out, but I'd already beaten at the review event, right? Like they invited me to LA to be interviewed by Kojima. And like, what the fuck are you talking about? And yeah, I'll go. And I went there and he hugged me and we just talked about Metal Gear. And he was so excited because I was the first fan he had met that had beaten it. So we talked for like 45 minutes for 2 seconds in this thing of me talking about Metal Gear. It was amazing.
It's he's an interesting cat. I like him. Shout out to some last shout outs. I guess we don't want to be here forever, but Shannon Studstill from Sony from Sony Santa Monica, the leader of Sony Santa Monica, has always been really friendly with us. Shout out to Sucker Punch, who was
I was gonna
really
get there.
great.
Brian Fleming, Nate Fox again, and like that was the same thing of I'll never forget when I went up to see Infamous the first time or whatever, and talking to them and just being like, these guys are all awesome. Like they're just cool dudes. You know what I mean? To actually, and then to be here years later, where I will never in my life forget watching that PlayStation 4 event when you were out there in New York, and it was me and Damon were watching it in the studio. The lights are off though, and like when I heard Nate's voice and I flipped the fuck out, and everybody's like, nothing was on screen yet. It was still like the logo, and I'm like, that's Nate Fox. This is Infamous. It's gonna be a Sucker Punch guy. Like I was like so fucking, and I like the fact that like we go up there and these people want Billy Harper. You know what I mean? Like we go up there and these people want to interact with us and want us to be parts of their lives. It's very touching.
Shout out to Eric Jensen at Sony Bend, who was one of the first, I think, very first people that worked at Sony that made it known to us that he worked at Sony. He's worked at Bend now for 10 years. Worked on Resistance, Retribution, and Uncharted Golden Abyss. Working on Days Gone. Just a really friendly dude. Good game designer. Family man.
Yeah.
Really, really nice guy. And then I mean, I don't even know like how we can go on and on and on and on and on. But these are the people. These are the days of our lives. These are the people that
make all this happen.
Make the games and facilitate our access, that facilitate the games being made. This is the little taste and behind the scenes of the people we know and why we know them and how we relate to them and why those relationships are important. And I hate seeing in years past the kind of the degradation and the attacking of these relationships that people have with each other where I think that they're important. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to each other's weddings or having Sunday dinner with each other. What it means is that these are the things that are necessary, and that they're good, they're important, that this is the way humans deal with each other, that it doesn't mean that our friendships or relationships with all of these people means that we treat them any differently. When their games suck, they know it and we know it.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I like giving people a little behind.
And that's the thing about it. Like whether it's from PR or this to a developer standpoint, when we don't like something and we let that be known, right? If that was to end a relationship, like you wouldn't be friends or have a relationship to begin with that person, right? And for me, I always think about for a personal example, and not even that bad of one, but like Gary Whitta, right? Like Gary had been around the office once or twice. I remember when we did the IGN for Haiti live stream, Nicole Tanner had him come through and do a thing with Dana, and they talked about Book of Eli, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I don't know this guy or whatever. And then I really met Gary when it was Walking Dead, when Telltale brought him on as a story consultant for season 1. And he came on up at noon when it was still I was still in that red tie and the gray jacket, and I touched his knee, and everybody thought that was funny. But I remember, like, he was like, yeah, and I worked on episode 4. Like, that's the one I actually did a story for. I was like, oh, man, I can't wait to play it. And I was reviewing them, too. And so then eventually, like, months later, I played episode 4, and it was the one I reviewed the lowest. I was like, this episode's kind of meandering, and it's not really, like, and, like, when you play it as a full game, I think it works a lot better. But when it was like, I've been waiting... It was old Telltale, 3 months, 3.5, 4 months for this. You know what I mean? I was like, what the hell? And it was one of the only comment Gary ever made about it was like, he was talking to some other kid, and some kid's like, well, Greg Miller didn't like that zombie movie that they were talking about. And he's like, well, we all know Greg Miller doesn't have the best taste in zombies things. And he did a winky emoticon. And like, now, of course, he's the most guest starred Game Over Greggy show person. You know what I mean? He's on all the time. He cried on our podcast. Like, we're bros, we're family. And like, if it would have been that he was so thin-skinned, or I was so unfairly vicious, right? They're like, then this relationship wouldn't work, and you wouldn't see that, and that would be the whole case of it.
Indeed. So, we forgot one group.
We forgot, I'm sure.
I mean, we forgot a ton of people,
Yeah.
I'm sure, but there's two more groups I want to get out there real quick. One, you will be happy I did. The first is for myself is Yacht Club.
I know where you're going second.
Who I adore to this day, and the people there are just great people, hardworking people, created a little bit of a niche for themselves and a whole lot of money, I hope, and are making a great game in Shovel Knight and all the expansions, and they've always treated me with a great kindness and respect. And then Drinkbox,
of course.
who just phenomenal team up there in Toronto, in Toronto, and have given us incredible access and incredible respect, and make great games, and we always encourage you to support them because they deserve your support.
Yeah, fantastic stuff there. And then, I mean, like, I'm trying to, again, we're going to forget people, and we're sorry. We're not assholes. You understand? 10 years, it wears on your brain. You start falling apart pretty quickly. Yeah. I mean, Michael and the team at Housemarque, I mean, I can go on. I know. Jaffe, we've mentioned, Cliffy. Of course. Deb Mars.
Yep.
Deb Mars is another one. Like, that was always fun to see your relationship with her grow, because, like, she was another one of mine, like, I want to know about Fat Princess. Tell me all about that.
Yeah, she's a fascinating woman. I really got to know her during Escape Plan, and her telling the story about how they developed that game. And whenever I drive by the bar, there's a bar downtown that she told me, she's like, I was here with some of the developers, and we went upstairs and drew on napkins that what would end up becoming Escape Plan. And I always drive by that bar in an Uber, and I'm like,
which bar is it?
It's the tabletop or the something
Tunnel
top. Tunnel Top.
Tunnel Top. I know Tunnel Top.
And I was like, that's so.
Video game history got me.
It's just a little piece of history.
No,
that's
a little awesome. I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking.
Just a tiny piece of history, right?
Sure.
And yeah, she's always been super friendly, a great mind for game design. For people that don't know, I don't think she's at Santa Monica anymore, but she helped with a bunch of different games there that were like kind of XDev games, whether it's Everybody's Gone to the Rapture or Escape Plan or Fat Princess and all that kind of stuff. So, which is what I always thought when everyone's like, Fat Princess is sexist. I'm like, well, the leader of Sony Santa Monica is a woman, and one of the people that helped make the game is a woman. So I don't know that I necessarily might not be the most sexist thing in the world, but okay. Who doesn't want to make the woman fat so you can't move her?
Yeah,
that sounds.
What a great idea!
That sounds that's an amazing idea.
Yeah, that's a funny little thing they did.
Anyway, yeah, we're gonna. I want to stop saying anything because I know
Steve Gaynor. I want to talk to.
Yeah, Steve Gaynor, of course.
We haven't. Again,
I felt so bad. I think I told you it was at Xbox last year. I went to Xbox, Microsoft at E3 to see, specifically to see Inafune. And Recore. And I was walking by, and Steve was showing Tacoma, and I was like, "Hey, Colin, what's going on?" Give me a hug, whatever. I'm like, "Hey, man, it's good to see you." Whatever. He's like, and I felt so bad. He's like, because I had to go to an appointment. He's like, "You want to come in and see Tacoma?" I'm like, "I gotta go. Like, I can't, and I'm sorry."
You got a platinum? Oh, not even on the system.
Oh, you're not bringing on PlayStation?
Go fuck yourself. You tip over the wall. I know. He's like, "No!" People screaming inside.
But what a great mind. Really, really nice guy.
Yeah. And really good to us too. We haven't touched on any of our colleagues, of course. Everybody at Giant Bomb, whether it be Dan, Jeff, Danny, who's not there, Mary Kish, who just left, Alexa, who's come in and done so much for us and stuff like that.
Yep, having dinner with her next week. She's a lot of people have come and gone from the GameSpot ecosystem yet.
Yeah, recently too.
Reichert and all these guys like that. But Reichert's still there, but he moved to New York. Some of our peers have been extraordinary to us as well.
Dave Lang, John Vignacchi. We'll stop doing that. We didn't go through any of the voice actor people. I'll never forget. I have again a photo of. Still, I'm frumpy now, but even frumpier Greg Miller with his hair not cut and way too big of a Mizzou shirt on, meeting Nolan North for the first time at E3. And that was a huge deal where like Sony was like, you need to be here at this time. And then they like walked me up and I'm like, holy shit, you're Nolan. I was like, that was awesome. Never thinking I'd be doing millions of videos with this guy. Never thinking, when I met Troy in passing at Final Fantasy 13's launch event here or whatever, just being like, oh man, you look like a real anime character. Again, he's going to be a part of my life forever. And Laura and Travis and all these different people. We didn't talk about anybody at Telltale who's been great to us. Telltale, another great example.
Job Stauffer.
Yeah, Telltale, exactly. You talk about respect, right? And like calling it as you see it and being on the ball. We talk so much shit about Telltale, and they're like,
it's me especially. I think I told the story when I saw you made an appointment for me to go see Batman because you're going to see and I ended up really liking Telltale's Batman series. And Job Stauffer, there's maybe 20 of us in there, journalists, etc. And he calls me out and he's like, to what do I owe this honor that Colin Moriarty will come to the Telltale booth to see it? And because they know, first of all, what the fuck does he care? I'm like I'm in a massive minority of people that that talk shit about them. But
everyone talks shit, but we just keep buying the game, so nothing's gonna change.
But I always thought that was a really funny,
and that's the thing. And people could hold grudges, and but it's that thing of like, well, the engine crashes a lot. We do eat a lot of saves. There is a hitch. What are you gonna do? We're not gonna punish people for it. So yeah, we'll stop there. In another 10 years, I guess we'll come back and do more.
Yeah, sorry to anyone that we forgot. You know who you are.
You know who you are. We know you love us, and you know you got us here.
And so thank you for all of the respect and kindness you've showed us.
And biggest shout out, of course, to all the best friends watching or listening right now, because obviously we wouldn't do any of this without you. And you guys have been obviously so supportive in the last 2 years to make Kind of Funny a thing with your not only your views, your support, your time, but your money, and obviously Patreon being the seed money that actually let us get out to do all this different stuff.
Yeah, we could not do this without you.
And then of course all the support you gave us at IGN, because again, it is that thing where you can dial it back as far as you want to, but like, I'm not going to go host up at noon if I didn't have a following that didn't make any sense based on a podcast nobody thought was listening to.
It's still an unbroken chain, but it starts with its first link. Like it's really amazing that it's like it's the weakest link. You can bank at any given time, but if you don't and you don't get anything wrong, then the pool becomes bigger. You see.
You remember this weakest link, everybody?
Bank
it. So that's the end of the show, but I actually have all the ending segments because that's normal. Colin, are you ready to meet your new best friend?
Yes.
This is P.S. I love this best friend, XOXO. This is usually where one of you writes in with your PSN name. We read it here. The other best friends send messages of love, respect, and support, and maybe friend requests. But instead, since this is a different show, we're doing a different one. This one comes from Curtis Dillon. Curtis Dillon says, "Hey, Colin and Greg. Been listening for years, and you guys inspired my career path. That's why I'm making a case for a different kind of best friend request. I'm a 24-year-old guy from Ireland, now living in Toronto, who is striving to be a games writer or media professional or whatever you want to call it. It's been my goal to work for IGN since I started listening to Beyond many moons ago, and however unrealistic that dream may be, I'm still working towards it. I've been writing steadily for about 5 years now for university magazines, newspapers, and websites, including What Culture, Game Skinny, and All Wrestling News. Basically, it would mean a lot for you guys to give out my Twitter, give it a shout out, allowing the community to check out some of my work and let me know if I'm on the right track. My handle is Curtis Dillon. That's CurtisDillon 92. Curtis Dillon 92. Maybe this is a lot to ask, but I thought, what the hell? You taught me to hustle and do whatever I can to achieve my dreams. Anyway, even if you don't read this, fuck you, we read it. Thank you guys for everything. Those words don't even look a little bit alike.
Having a stroke.
Well, not the first time. Thank you guys for everything you do and many more years of it. Hopefully, I can meet you all one day. Curtis Dillon.
If you're lucky.
92. Go get us. Go get him, Curtis.Maybe in 10 years you're doing this podcast. And you're like, who shaped me. It was Greg. Right before he flipped that car over onto a van full of nuts. Here's PSN's worst name of the week. As you know, Shuhei Yoshida hates you and doesn't let you change your PSN name. So we read a bad PSN name here. You can complain about it, and then one day Shuhei will let you change his name, and we'll have a big supporting thing. This one comes from his forum name is Dobby for PSN. He says, "Thanks to Harry fucking Potter, my nickname is the nickname that falls asleep and gets dicks drawn on its face. Dobby 66801. I mean, what the fuck? I had that name before, you stupid fucking house elf JK. If I get one more dirty cum-filled sock in the mailbox, I'm giving someone an anal chili cheese confit. Fuck you, PSN. Let me change it. What fucking idiot puts his zip code in said stupid name? Oh, yeah, right, me. Fuck it. This shit sucks so bad, I deserve to keep it. Dobby for PSN."
Wow, that's a rambling kind of thing there.
Dobby 66801. I never would have thought it was his zip code. I just thought it was random ass numbers, but that makes sense.
He's giving away his location somewhere in the middle of the country.
There you go. Go get him. Everybody find him. All right, sorry, I didn't have ad copy when we recorded. So PSN's worst name of the week is brought to you by Mac Weldon. Stop dressing like a goon and start dressing in Mac Weldon. They let me write that. Mac Weldon believes in smart design, premium fabrics, and simple shopping. People use this all the time. They do it, they get clothes sent to them, and they love them. Mac Welding will be the most comfortable underwear, socks, shirts, undershirts, hoodies, and sweatpants that you will ever wear. It cracks me up every time. They have a line of silver underwear and shirts that are naturally antimicrobial. There it is. It means that they eliminate the odor. Kev, these people, they go work out, they get sweaty, and then they stink, but this will knock it out. They want you to be comfortable. So if you don't like your first pair of underwear, you can keep it, and they will still refund you your money, no questions asked. Not only does Mac Weldon's underwear, socks, and shirts look good, but they perform well, too. Go to macweldon.com and get 20% off your order by using the promo code I love you. That's macweldon.com, promo code I love you. Back to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been PSI Love You XOXO, episode 73. Thank you for coming along for the ride. Remember, PSI Love You XOXO posts every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on youtube.com/kindafunnygames and podcast services around the globe. It's the #1 PlayStation podcast because you support it, and we can't thank you enough for that and all the dreams you've given us. Every episode of PSI Love You XOXO ends in a song in a segment we call Singing a Shoe. Hey, this is where one of you talented motherfuckers goes to kindafunny.com/PSM and you give me a YouTube link for a song you made, or in addition to an MP3 you made of the song you made. And then I put the MP3 at the end of our MP3, and I put the YouTube video at the end of our YouTube video via annotation. This comes from Chris, Charlie, Chris, Ryan, and Tom, calling themselves Mile High City. One Chris with a K, one Chris with a C, just letting you know. Hi, Colin and Greg, and Kevin if you're there. I don't think Kevin's still here. Longtime listener and big fan of your work. I've been waiting for the best opportunity to submit my song for Singing a Shoehei, and the time is now. I manage Mile High City, an upcoming indie rock band from the southeast of England. Don't say oi. Hard not to, though. And we have recently released 2 singles to the world for free. Here's our debut single, Back of the Wall. We love it, and we hope you will too. Our debut album, Playing with Matches, will be released to the world on iTunes, Amazon, etc. on the 10th of February. In the meantime, you can download Back of the Wall and our second single, Stella, for free from milehighcity.bandcamp.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search Mile High City. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy our music. Chris with a K, Charlie, C with a C, Ryan, and Tom.
C with a C?
Mile High City. It's been a long fucking week.
All right, let's get it over with.
Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.
Bye.